you're listening to this, there's a good chance you work within the real estate investing industry. There's another good chance that you would like to increase the sales of your products or services. Well, you're in the right place. United States Real Estate Investor is a platform you need to place your brand directly in front of your target audience. With our focused, growing audience of real estate investing beginners, enthusiasts, and seasoned professionals, you can continually reach our captivated viewers and listeners with ease. To learn more or to get started today, just visit UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com/advertising. That's UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com/advertising. Get ready to increase your brand awareness and your bottom line. Attract clients with content.
Oh boy. All right. We are here. I can't believe I'm even doing this because, let's be honest. I'm not the biggest fan of politics and political stuff, but it seemed really important because apparently there are a lot of changes happening in the real estate industry, according to what people think, based on Trump coming in with new administration, so on and so on. So before I get started, I'll introduce who I am. I am Antonio Holman, founder of United States Real Estate Investor, real estate investing media company. And the goal is to help people learn how to achieve financial freedom through real estate investing. So I'm glad everyone's here. Hopefully nothing crashes in the midst of this, and hopefully there are no fist fights. I think we're all adults, but we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll bring the guests in. And I'm running the show by myself this time. James is my cohort, and I'm usually in the background, but now I'm right in front. So if it all falls apart, it's on me. So let's do it.
Give me liberty, or give me death.
All right, we are here, back from that crazy intro.
That was awesome.
Got to keep it fun. You got to keep it fun, man.
Good job.
So everybody's here. Well, we still have two people coming in. Nicole and Brian Briscoe are both coming in just a few minutes late, but that's all right. There's still room in here. We had one drop off. We're still good. So before we get started, I'll have everybody introduce themselves. Let's see. I guess Sandra, we'll start with you, and then Paul, and then work our way down to James, Brad, and Ashley. So go ahead. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Sandra Fernandez. I am a licensed realtor in the St. Louis, Missouri market, and I'm a real estate investor. I actually started as an investor and then became a realtor. So I'm a landlord. I buy and flip homes. I teach rental investing. I just came out with a book I finally published. Antonio knows about that. So I'm really just looking to share what I'm seeing happening in my market and what clients are looking for and sharing with me. So thanks for having me on, Antonio.
All right. My pleasure. My pleasure. Paul, what you got?
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Paul Anderson. I'm located in Marion, Idaho. I am a lifelong, reformed real estate addict. Grew up in the business with the Fernandez and with the Navy also. Started in residential, with commercial. Now I do lending across all platforms. A small residential site with an emphasis on commercial and do a lot of vertical construction financing. I also invest. I've got short and long-term rentals, commercial buildings, land holdings. So I try to be very well diverse in this area.
All right. All right. Paul, just to give you a heads up, your audio is super low. I'm not sure why. I'm trying to see if I can.
I can fix that. You don't want all of me at once.
Okay, cool. All right, James, what's up?
Hey. Well, if anybody hasn't seen this show before, I'm the regular host for our monthly shows. It's kind of nice to sit back and let Antonio run the show this time. But anyway, I got into real estate on the investing side. Like Sandra, I got licensed as a realtor. Had a long journey, basically mostly sticking in single family residences, doing rent to own investing, and now co-living, renting by the room. Also raised capital for some large multifamily projects. So that's kind of the gist. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks for being here. All right, Brad.
Hi, how you
got going on?
How you doing? I'm Brad Dwin. Hopefully you can hear my mic because I can't tell. I'm a Maryland-based real estate investor. I have not been doing it that long, about 6 or 7 years, but I have a background in real estate marketing and PR. My business is about 80% wholesaling. I've done a bunch of flips, and I've got a couple rental properties, and I'm actually more in the market for rental properties these days. And I pretty much focus in Maryland, but I do deals occasionally in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and I've done a little bit of private lending. I'm starting to get into that realm as well. So I'm just happy to be here. I haven't done a roundtable type discussion in a long time. Back in a former life, I was a spokesperson for the mortgage industry during the housing crisis. So I did a lot of roundtables and a lot of traveling around the country, dealing with homeowners facing foreclosures. So I'm excited to be here.
All right, so give me a second because for some reason, my computer is going haywire. Gotta love it. Give me just a moment here. Who knows why? All right. Boy, oh boy. Gotta love the timing.
All right.
Oh my goodness. All right, I can't see anything. Let's see.
Well, since I'm the only one on screen, I could just plug my business for the next 2 hours.
True.
He's a promoter.
Oh man, I can't believe this. Let's see. Give me just a moment here. I'm going to let's see what I can do.
Oh, his audio's getting glitchy. You guys hearing that too?
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do that. Oh, this is crazy. This is the first time I've ever seen this happen. Go figure, right?
Yeah.
2024 is almost over.
Oh boy. Come on. Let's try this. I don't know what this is going to do, but
I'll just keep smiling since I'm the only one on screen.
No pressure, Brad.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, I'm back.
Let me see.
There we go.
My goodness. Everything goes wrong only when it's live. Never.
Of course.
That is the downside of streaming live.
All right, Ashley, what you got?
Hey, everybody. I'm Ashley DeHart from California. I'm a realtor. I also have a background in teaching and psychology. I kind of like to mix it up. And I'm also in part of the real estate, LGBTQ plus real estate alliance, which is a national organization. I'm the VP of the Central California chapter. So definitely enjoy that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Over here checking, making sure my phone doesn't go crazy while we're doing this. So let's try to get started here. the first thing, as I'm pulling everything back up since I had to close it, the first thing I did notice was a discussion about immigration. And a lot of people are, they're kind of freaking out about immigration. And, you know, like I said before, I don't know a lot of things about politics. I tend not to follow politics. But it seems like things are kind of lined up for a really big change. So the general consensus that I'm getting from a few people is that, which I never really thought of it this way, a lot of people are saying that if immigration changes and there's a lockdown on immigration, then that could possibly mean a lot of people who are utilizing non-citizen labor for construction and things like that, that could suffer. That could push the costs up for everything, construction, employment, things like that. What do you think about that? Is that really an issue, or is that actually concrete? I mean, could that be that big of a change? Are there that many non-citizens working at construction sites and building homes and doing handiwork? What do you think? Anybody, just jump in.
So I'll jump in. I have some statistics for you about that topic, actually. Especially here in California, we have a lot of immigrant workers. We have a lot of agriculture going on, but also in the construction industry. So in the US overall, 30% of workers in construction are immigrants. And in California and Texas, that number is 40%. And it's difficult for them to work because of visas. They're scarce, and they're hard to get. They take a long time. The non-agriculture H-2B visa is only allowed for 66,000 visas per fiscal year across the entire country. And the construction industry used just under 6,000 of those in 2018. The other visa that they can use, the EB-3, it takes 1 to 3 years to process. So it's very difficult for them to get visas, which kind of creates this disparity in pay for them, which allows, unfortunately, them to be kind of taken advantage of. And they make about 75% of what US-born workers get. And we're already seeing a lot of shortages in the construction industry as it is before thinking about immigration.
Wow, interesting.
I'll just say in the Midwest, we don't see as much, you know, obviously in Missouri, we're right in the middle of the country. We do have immigrant workers, but not such a high percentage. And it's really been a problem here for a long time. So I don't know that it will change a whole lot because we've been struggling anyway. So especially with skilled labor, plumbers, electricians, carpenters.
Yeah, I'm here in Vegas now, so I do see a lot of migrant workers, like all over the place, you know, which makes sense. The other part about that is Vegas is having a huge boom of construction. Everywhere you look, there's construction. There's homes, everything. Paul, what do you got?
You guys are always booming. I'm down there all the time. So it just does. It is truly the city that never sleeps. It's not New York, it's Vegas. But,
yeah,
you know, our market, because we are kind of predominantly either agriculture or construction right now. So we are, we see it more on the agricultural side, not so much on the construction side. The biggest problem we're having here now is we've had explosive growth over the last decade. And we don't have the skilled workers in the trades that we need to do the job. So we have a lot of jobs that are backed up, held up, not progressing because we don't have the skilled workers, and the laborers aren't necessarily as big of an issue here. But what I'm really curious about, and obviously we know that there are supposed changes coming, what is that going to look like to Ashley's point to make it an easier process to obtain a work visa and a path for citizenship that is probably a little bit more predictable and easier to obtain.
Yeah. Which that's funny. I was just thinking about that because a lot of people are saying that it takes too long to obtain U.S. citizenship. But I mean, shouldn't it be that way? so you can show your knowledge about the country and your changing of heart about the country that you're trying to get into?
I would say that I don't know if any of you have looked at the actual test to take to become a U.S. citizen, but I would venture a guess that most U.S. born citizens would not be able to pass that test.
You're right. You're right.
I feel like that's a little hypocritical to expect someone to know more about our country than people who have been living in it their entire lives.
Yeah. That is an angle to come from, because I've heard that before. And a lot of street interviews, and you're asking young people who are pretty close to high school and that type of knowledge, and they're failing miserably. So that's a great point.
That's an educational issue, though. That's a whole
that's
a whole different. And I would like to know what changed, because in the early 90s, when I was in the hotel industry helping companies buy and sell hotels, we did a lot because there were certain job tax credits that were provided in the 90s. So during the first Gulf War, we hired a lot of refugees and immigrants through the local refugee centers. And I know, and I can't remember where it was and which program, but they had a program where they would come in, they would get a 2-year work visa. And inside of that 2-year window, they had to obtain their citizenship. And I worked with side by side with a lot of these people and got to know them on a daily basis. And many of them were able to obtain their citizenship inside of that 2-year window. Now, granted, this was 30 plus years ago. So I'm wondering if something has changed with that. And if so, what is it? Is it an administrative change? Is it processing times? What is it that's led to making this process so difficult as we keep hearing today?
Yeah, I've been wondering that too. So I don't know if there's any changes.
I have a couple of thoughts on this issue, actually, and I've thought about this one because the crews that I hire are largely, populated with immigrant workers, especially my main contractor. But I question how realistic it is for this actual mass deportation system to be put in place. And I mean, that's what always gets to me. Like, is it realistic? What are the resources involved in doing it? Is it actually going to happen? So I'm not, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm as concerned as some folks are. And just talking with a lot of my contractors who use immigrant labor, they don't feel as concerned about it. And maybe they know something I don't. But that's just kind of my thoughts on it.
Tom Holman's ready to put anybody in prison right now. Mm-hmm. That guy.
What are the resources involved in doing that, though? Is it realistic? I don't know if it is.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
that's
Trump
what we're all asking.
He's willing to use military if necessary. And my question personally is, what does that look like? Because to me, it's a little bit reminiscent of the Gestapo. Absolutely. And rounding people up in houses. And if you look in any way not American born, which whatever that means, because how do you prove legitimacy? How do you prove that you're here legally or not legally? And is it going to be another situation where we're separating families and locking children away from their parents? Mm-hmm. That's, the humanitarian side of it is a huge issue for me personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is all an odd kind of a discussion because this entire country, nobody's from here. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody is from everywhere, and this is truly a melting pot of people. So I don't know. Maybe they have some plan in place to, weed out who's who and figure out whatever. I don't know. So it's all speculation.
And you hear about this. I think it's going to take cooperation and coordination from all levels to make sure that we're not just automatically deporting people and the wrong people. And inevitably, if you're trying to do something this massive, there are going to be mistakes made along the way. But how do we mitigate those mistakes and still treat everybody humanely?
Yeah, and the other part about it is they're like, well, if your parent is an illegal citizen and the child was born here, then if the parent has to be deported, then it seems like they're saying, well, the whole family can just go, which that's brutal. That's very brutal. So, yeah.
Well, I think this is also politics, guys. So there's a lot of things that are said. Let's see what actually happens.
Right. Correct. Yeah, I know. That's really what all of this is about.
Right now, we're all playing into the game of politics and theater, and let's see what actually comes to fruition.
Right. All
There's
right,
a
so let's.
psychological idea that people's future behavior can be based pretty solidly on their past behavior. And so I try to take things in context of what they have already done. So looking back at the last time Trump was in office, what things did he accomplish? What things were affected and how were they affected? So like material costs, for instance, going way up because of some former policies that he had introduced.
Wow. All right. This is exciting. As much as I am not a fan of politics, it's
here we go.
I'm curious. I'm curious. I don't know. I guess that's what you're supposed to be, because this is the country you live in. So, yeah. All right. So let's move on to the next one. Okay. Trade policies and material costs. Okay. So let's see if I have some quotes here. This is interesting. Let's see. The new Trump administration's trade policies have prompted various reactions. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada. Americans are realizing Trump's tariffs on Canada would make life a lot more expensive. I mean, from what I see, Canada's extremely expensive already. So let me give you some more quotes. Economist Raymond Robertson said, electronics are basically ubiquitous. I don't know how this wouldn't be incredibly disruptive. The Tax Foundation quote is, the Trump administration's tariffs in 2018 and 2019 amounted to nearly $80 billion worth of new taxes on Americans. I'll give you one more quote. Economist Harry G. Broadman, Mr. Trump failed. Trade Tariffs 101 at Wharton. What do you guys think? Do you think his whole like tariffs idea is going to like really screw up the economy? It seems like it could possibly make it really bad before it gets really good. I don't know anything. What do you think?
Well, again, if we look back at what happened in 2018, you kind of touched on it, right? So Trump decided, China, we're going to tariff you 20%. And let's remember, he wants to do 50% now. So all of these results, just at least double it. So when he did this tariff, China retaliated with their own tariff on our stuff. And it created a huge jump in the price index level. The percentage where it was rising in 2016 was 0.4%. In 2017, when he started these tariffs, it rose up to 2.7%. And then in 2018, it was 4.8% of a rise. So those are stacked on top of each other. And then after they negotiated about the tariffs and kind of backed off, it went back down to 1.2%. And to your point about Canada, the amount of materials that we import from Canada is astronomical. We imported in 2023 just under $51.5 million in forestry products, and 40% of that was from Canada. 18% of the minerals and metals, which was $252 million worth, came from Canada. And 48.5% of the energy-related materials, which was $261 million, came from Canada. So that's a lot of money that is going to be imported or imparted onto the American people. And I know people will mitigate that by using U.S. companies, but the studies showed that that's not how that works. The CRS said that U.S. consumers and companies bore nearly the entire increased cost association with the tariffs. And it affects low and mid-income people more than high-income households, because those people use more of their proportionate dispendable income on tradable goods. So the American citizens are the ones who are going to be affected by this and who are going to pay for it. We're in a tax or a trade deficit. And so there's no way that that's going to work out in the way that he feels like it's going to.
Okay. Anybody else got something on this one? This is a good one. What
Good
do you got?
stats, Ashley.
Yeah.
I thought I was prepared. I'm not that well prepared as Ashley, though.
Sorry, data is my jam. I love statistics and deep diving on this kinds of stuff. And again, it's kind of what I live for.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is we rely on goods from other countries. I mean, it's especially in our industry. I mean, it's how it works. And we all saw after COVID that the price of a 2x4, even at Home Depot, went from 99 cents to like $6. So right there, you got to build that into your cost when you're figuring out your rehab numbers on properties. And it's been a challenge for the last 4 years already. And to add this to the mix, I think makes it even more challenging, and it makes me want to stay out of, flipping homes altogether and just focus on the wholesaling piece of my business and let someone else deal with it. Yeah. But at the same time, it, as Ashley said, it affects more than just our industry. It's a ripple effect. And that's my biggest concern right there. I mean, costs are already sky high for a lot of the basics. And if we go down this road, do we ever recover if we go down this road and it goes badly? That's the real issue.
There's a lot of talk about, nationalization with Trump administration. Everybody wants to start veering off and coming back into the United States, keeping everything here. But the thing is, we've become a very globalized society. And from what I've learned recently is statistics have shown that utilizing import and export models worldwide increases every country's economy. So on the surface, it seems like this could really crash things pretty bad. What do you think?
Well, I think your point, it has the potential to have dramatic results, and the people who are going to feel it are obviously the people, what's left of the middle class and the lower class, because they're greater consumers, and these changes impact them, unlike the upper class. I think that, again, I always go back to, there's so much hyperbole out there right now, and sound bites and everything else. So I know we've got a little bit of history there, but I'll be curious to see what really actually happens in January. I know there's a lot of proposals for things, but and he can go out there and provide all the sound bites in the world, and the media loves it and we all gobble it up. But the reality of it is when he's in office, what can he truly do and truly affect? And there's a lot of other parties that are going to have input on this. And perhaps this brings people to the table and comes forward with solutions, because somebody, and I haven't verified this, but I believe that somebody said Trudeau went down and visited with him a couple of weeks ago to talk about this. So maybe this will spark some conversations that will come to some resolutions that are beneficial for all parties. Because right now we have a trade deficit that is astronomical and it's growing. And how do we solve that?
If you're speaking about him going down to Mar-a-Lago, it actually ended up being where Trudeau was saying that there's no way that they're going to pay that, and that they would be putting trade tariffs on us as well and retaliating. So basically he told Trump, like, there's no way, and it's really going to turn around and be a disaster.
Yeah, I kind of wait.
I
said, my problem is you just hear about it and none of us have an ability to verify what was actually said. I mean, if nothing else, the fact that two people got to the table, whether or not that conversation turned out well, I always look at that as a starting point when people can sit down face to face, and it's not done through the media or social media, and it's actually the key principles involved, sitting in front of each other, having conversations about it.
Mm-hmm.
In our area, and I think this is the case throughout the country, from what I'm reading, people are really struggling for jobs and income. So I'm an advocate of let's try to keep as many jobs here in the U.S. or bring back jobs here. I'm not against trades with other countries. I think we do need that, like you said, just for a healthy economy overall. But housing prices have gone up so much, people are struggling to afford houses. So I would like to see more jobs come here and stay here, and better paying jobs. I know everyone likes the cheap goods and the imported goods because they cost less, but I think the imbalance really hurts people when it comes to being able to afford a house.
Yeah.
Such
Absolutely.
a double-edged sword, isn't it? Like
It is.
We want our cake and we want to eat it too, which is the worst
right.
saying ever.
Yeah.
Like, such a confusing saying, but you get it. Like, how do we find that balance, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
People have to decide, like, is it that they want people to have a good quality of life for the middle class? And what do we need to do to bulk that up? Or do we want to save 50 cents on a carton of eggs? So you cannot have both worlds. You have to make a decision about what is most important for our country in the long term. And unfortunately, it feels like greed is just overpowering the need for a healthy economy and a stable life for most people.
Yeah. This is interesting because all of these topics, they're so good and they're so intricate, which makes them so good. I mean, to me, that's just my opinion, because it's like there's not necessarily one answer for any of this. So, I mean, hey, this is a good debate. This is a roundtable, so it's good. All right, so we have Nicole Beauchamp just showed up, so let me bring her to the stage,
Cool.
and we'll get a little introduction. Hey, Nicole, welcome to the show, and let us know who you are and what you're all about.
Hi, everybody. Apologies. My name is Nicole Beauchamp. I am a real estate broker based in New York City. Been doing this for almost 25 years, as I was very rudely reminded a couple of weeks ago. And I'm excited to be here with all of you.
All right. I'm over here running the controls here.
Welcome.
All right. Okay. So next topic we have, let's see what we got. I feel like this is like a game show. Deregulation and environmental concerns, which, I mean, this issue has existed typically with the same types of administrations wanting to stop regulation and, more of a free market. So let's see what I got here. The new Trump administration's deregulatory policies and environmental stance have prompted varied reactions. Lena Moffitt of Evergreen Action, she says, this move is unlawful, violating the National Environmental Policy Act and prioritizing corporate interests over environmental safety. Alexandra Adams, Natural Resources Defense Counsel, says the policy could harm communities and the environment. Rick Spinrod, hopefully I said that right, from NOAA administrator, scientists should highlight the public benefits of climate research to combat political cutbacks. Those are just some. I got 3 more quotes, but those are just some of them. Okay, listen, it's common sense. Whenever you deregulate certain things, people get a little greedy. They get a little, hungry to make more profit and let some things lax. The safety of employees slips. This is all normal stuff. None of this has happened or it has not happened before. You think about all the rats that got ground up in the meat back in the early 1900s. This is all normal. We know this. None of us are like confused. So the question is there a chance that type of activity could come back in a landslide? That's the question. What do you think?
I don't know,
I
man.
talk a lot, so I'm trying to let other people answer first before I just jump in.
No, that's okay. Anybody.
So the way that regulation policies are set up right now is that they are required to go through a process of weighing the benefits with the costs of it. So it is important to look at that, first of all, that we already have a process to make sure that it's worth doing the things that we're doing. And so deregulating, especially in the environmental issues, we have to look at how that's going to impact us overall and long term. There are a lot of non-climate related health benefits. Like if we really look at it, why is it that we are putting all of these things in? Why are we doing the EPA? It's because when our climate is bad, it affects us as human beings. We're not meant to live in an environment where we can't breathe the air. If you have gone to any big city in the 1990s and dealt with the smog in the air. Like, it is really hard to live with. It makes you feel gross, and healthcare overall gets more expensive because people have to go and get treated for that and deal with the results of that. So we might be saving a few dollars in companies not having to pay for things or do things in a better way, but we're going to pay for it one way or the other. And personally, I would prefer that companies have to be more restricted in how they process their goods and how they run their companies than have to have the American people suffer with their health.
Yeah. That just reminded me of a podcast series I'm listening to right now about wasn't it Karen Silkwood? They made a movie about that years ago because the company she was working for, they were processing plutonium, and the safety regulations were not in place whatsoever. You had young kids playing with the plutonium with their bare hands in the plant. So, I mean, this does fall in line with that. I don't think that's going to happen. I sure as hell don't think so. Hey, you never know. But a lot of people are worried that the regulations are going to lax. People are going to get hurt. You know, there's going to be insurance costs going through the roof. And once the insurance companies jump on board, we're all screwed. We're all screwed. So, anybody else?
You know, I just got off the phone with a buddy of mine. He's like, I just got this green thumb award, like this 3-foot tall green thumb. And he's like, recent years, he's been helping clean up water in an area here in Colorado. And that's why I got this green thumb award. But he's like, it's crazy because he's like, I've paved more of the earth in this area than probably anybody else. Like, he's, you know, on the development side. So it's good that he's also doing this, but it's maybe just a Band-Aid, but at least some efforts being made and there's some awareness, and at least he's aware and he's being rewarded for it. But I think there's definitely got to be some regulation where you got to find that balance though. But I think deregulating, that's going the wrong way. Like we've seen what the effects have been, like that Silkwood story, if there's no regulations. So,
and then we can reminisce about the 2018 or 2008 crash from a lot of things that weren't paid attention to. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, I think the regulation is important, but in a lot of cases, the regulations are in place. It's enforcement that we're lacking. The resources to enforce it, the desire to enforce it, corruption around the enforcement. So that's something I'm hoping that at some point we can get a better handle on.
Yeah.
Kind of who regulates the regulators.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's another component that really makes a lot of people nervous, because if we look at who is being placed in positions of heading different departments, that makes me concerned. And also, if we look at other regulations, deregulations that he has proposed, putting less red tape on home loans, I mean, anybody who knows anything about real estate recognizes what happened in the market crash of the early 2000s. It was because they gave anybody with a pulse a home loan. So really, if we're not learning from our mistakes, people, what are we doing? We don't want to create that. And privatizing Freddie and Fannie, like, okay, I see the idea that maybe it will make rates competitive, but it could also just open the floodgates for corporate greed. And Freddie and Fannie is like the root that's holding us together. Like, that is the one we can rely on to kind of be looking toward people and not just corporate. And so I'm baffled by all of that.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of a question. Is this an organizational issue or problem, or is this a humanity problem? Because, you know, the people make up the organizations, and the corruption comes from the people who are in the organization together. So what's wrong with us? I mean, that's really the heart of the questions, really. Because I don't know, because, you know, who's regulating the regulators? Correct. No one. Nicole, you got anything to say on this one?
You know, the other thing that I was thinking of is the need for more sustainable building. And when we think about the impact of sustainable building on just better energy use, better efficiency, it's more expensive at the onset, but the savings long term are better. But again, who's regulating the regulators?
Mm-hmm.
And the humanity question, that is perhaps the question of the century. But there's not enough thought about, in many ways, the humanity and the human impact of the regular everyday person, as opposed to, you know, the 1% are not feeling anything that is going on here in terms of the struggle. It's your regular everyday people that you can tell when you're in the grocery store and you're watching people decide what they're going to keep, because it's down to that point, the difference between, okay, I don't think I'm going to buy the eggs because the eggs is going to put me $4 above budget and I don't have the $4. Like, that's where we actually are today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I haven't eaten eggs in many years, so I'm oblivious.
I mean, I remember,
I don't know.
I think it was one of my first Costco trips right when the price of eggs spiked. And I'm going, wait a minute, something here doesn't make sense. The thing that used to cost me $7 was now $16.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, but I just bought this like a month ago. How did this happen? And like, I watch this on a weekly basis when I go to the grocery store, and I'm watching people sort of play the, okay, I can't do this, or I can't do that. And it's heartbreaking to watch. It's heartbreaking to see people standing on pantry lines that go around the block and around the corner in the middle of Manhattan.
Yeah. Manhattan. That's a population there. That's an economy there. That's a government there.
It's an economy, you know, and it's a very expensive place to live and work. But we often forget, I think, just in terms of a broader perspective, the percentage of the United States population that actually earns six figures is so incredibly small. And that gets lost in the conversation. People think, oh, people above 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, but the vast majority of people do not earn six figures. And think about the cost of living relative to their actual incomes.
Yeah.
One thing I see that I don't know the answer to, but I even see memes on Facebook about it all the time, is why is the healthier food the most expensive food? You know, so I think it's unfortunate that folks in lower income brackets, or that are really having to struggle with their budgets, are having to choose cheaper foods, more highly processed foods that we know are unhealthier, that have the food additives that we need to reduce in the overall food supply. But that's a real struggle too.
It's a real struggle.
It is.
And that hasn't changed. And that's been a problem for years and years and years. And Whole Foods, we see the memes about Whole Foods being whole paycheck, which is generally kind of true. I don't even go to Whole Foods if I can avoid it, because I think to myself, okay, I can go to Whole Foods, maybe I'll go to Trader Joe's, maybe I'll go to Aldi's, which is like the Trader Joe's cousin, because we're all trying to find the ways to economize. But I'm coming from a position of relative privilege, that I can make the choice, and that I have the luxury of time to go hunting things down. If you're working 3 jobs just to survive, you don't have the luxury of time. You're literally just trying to survive on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
And not only for grocery shopping, but then you think about, what time do you have to actually cook that food? to prepare that food.
Exactly.
So that's where we go back to what Sandra referenced with the frozen meals, the heavily processed foods that young kids are getting. And then Trump wants to talk about defunding school lunches. Like, sometimes those kids only eat at school and that's the only healthy food they get. And now you want to take that away as well. Like, that's appalling.
Yeah.
Well, the school food around my area is not that healthy. It's all processed.
Considering a Hot Pocket or a frozen Lunchable or kid cuisine or whatever, compared to actually getting vegetables, actually getting some kind of protein. No, it's not amazing food. I feel like we should be putting more money into our schools, both teachers and food, but it's going to be healthier than they're going to have access to if their family is on a time and a budget crunch.
Right. No, I agree.
Yeah. You know what I'm seeing as we talk about this? I see financial education failure. I see health education failure. And I see a massive amount of corporate greed. I mean, that capitalism has cultivated, that's what I see. And it makes me question, it's like, is education really the answer? Because when you have children and you educate them, quote unquote, properly, a lot of these issues start to disappear generationally. And I think the greed from person to person or organization to organization is what's keeping that education down and buried, which is the reason why this platform exists, is because the education system just doesn't teach you about how to build wealth. It teaches you how to be a worker, a cog in the machine. And that's pretty sad. That's sad.
That's pretty sad, but it also feels like the educational system and teaching critical and logical thinking has sort of disappeared. When I can't sleep in the middle of the night, I'm ashamed to admit, I scroll on Instagram and TikTok. And sometimes it helps me fall back asleep. Other times it just enrages me because there's so much misinformation. And if you don't have the ability or you haven't been taught that you should research and evaluate multiple sources of information, the information that's getting out there and that's sort of catchy is leading people down the wrong path. And maybe it's because I'm old and I remember sitting and going through card catalogs and researching and double checking and triple checking. I triple check everything even before I send an email or send a message to someone. And sometimes the things that are out there just clearly have no parameters and no research behind them. But that's maybe that's my pet peeve at the moment this week.
Don't feel alone, Nikki, and I'm glad you brought up that point, because even right now everybody's watching us online, but we become so emotionally dominant in our decision making. And to your point, I love the fact that you brought up critical thinking, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm old enough. When I was going to school and was going through college, critical thinking were actually courses that we took and we studied, and we learned how to research information and how to decipher things and how to verify things. And we've gotten away from that so much, and we live in sound bites and headlines and reels in 30 seconds.
And not only that, I remember debate class where you had to research and present your point. Even if you fundamentally disagreed with it, you had to think about the process of how you would try to convince your counterparty that you were in the right position and vice versa. And to me, when I think about it now, looking back, that's such a fundamental part of how my brain works and how I approach everything today. And it seems like that part of the educational process has disappeared for a large segment of the population. Then you can argue that maybe there are certain schools that are teaching it, but generally speaking, it seems like that has disappeared from the program for a lot of people, unfortunately.
So coming from an educational background and gone through the credential program in California and taught in schools, You're absolutely right. They do teach these skills to children on paper, but the moment that a student ever tries to speak up or tries to debate something that they see that's not working, or they want something to work better, or even as a teacher, that's why I left, because I would see something that's wrong and needs to be fixed, and I'd bring it up to administration and would get shut down every time. So it's one thing to teach the process of it, and it's another thing to allow students to use it and to practice that. And we have to remember schools, the education system as it is, was created to teach people how to be assembly line workers, to work from 9 to 5, to have specific things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. It was not built to create thinkers. And those schools that do teach that are the Ivy League schools, the private schools that the more wealthy and affluent people are able to send their children to. It's not the public school down in the low income portion of town. Those schools, they don't even let the kids get up and run around at recess. They have them line up, and very prison pipeline type situations going on. Like, our education system is just in shambles, and they like it that way because then it suppresses people who are getting the shaft in a lot of these political policies, and allowing those who are in power to stay in power and to keep the system benefiting them.
Yeah.
Well, I think Antonio's comment he made earlier about financial literacy, but an educated populace is dangerous.
Yes, correct. Yeah, I just saw something yesterday actually online. This woman says they just want to keep you dumb, uneducated, and fed and entertained. That's it. So then you're easy to overtake. And I was like, well, that's pretty accurate if you ask my opinion. So yeah. And Ashley, to touch on some things you said, one thing I've realized is typically, not all the time, but typically a lot of wealthy families, they tend to keep that knowledge in the family. They educate their family and the people who are immediately around them. A lot of people who are on the lower scale financially and economically, they don't have those same types of behaviors typically. So that's, does it come down to humanity and the family structure and things like that? The family structure is a disaster right now. So that's one thing that really needs to be worked on. And a lot of people say that the family structure could help repair those financial issues and those educational issues if the family structure was allowed to come back to what it used to be. And a lot of the conservative people are saying, yes, that's exactly what we're saying. That's exactly why we voted for Trump's administration. Do you guys think that is the heart of the issue? Or is that still, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that? What is it?
It's interesting because you can make that argument, but you can also make the argument that it's very insular. So even if the family structure is back in place, that knowledge, we're talking about people who fundamentally lack access to certain levels of knowledge. So it's not really going to solve the problem per se. It's oh my God, I just had a senior moment. There was a thought in my brain. And even as families gain more economically, there's still the divide between the social structure and the educational structure that you can't just transport yourself from one to another. It just doesn't work that way. We'd like to think that it does, but it doesn't.
Interesting. You also touched on something that I realized a few months back was a lot of people, they have been saying lack of access to information. And I always wonder, I never really understood that in this modern society, at least not fully, with insider information with families and friends of wealth. I get that. But when it comes to us having access to libraries and internet, the information's there. Isn't it our duty to seek that information?
How many people have access? But also, how many people actually have access to the libraries? How many people actually have access to high-speed internet to even do the research?
The library has all of that, don't they?
Well, but it's
what if
time
the library
too.
has limited hours, or they're not open every day, or it's only open for a couple of hours of the day? And we have to think about the structure. If you are in an environment where your adult person can take you to the library and spend that time with you. But if you're in an environment where your adult person is working 2 jobs just to put food on the table, you don't have time. No one is taking you to the library. I spent a ton of time in the library as a kid. I was probably happiest in the library. Why? My mother had the time. She took me to the library. I went to the library. Libraries were open on Saturdays. I went to museums. I went to concerts because my parents had the time and the means to make those investments for me, to have those experiences.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And a lot of students, like younger adults and older students, they're also stacked with the responsibility of caring for their younger siblings. So even if their adult is off working and they have their own time to go to the library themselves, they don't have that freedom because they're still having to take care of younger siblings because their family can't afford someone to come watch the kids while mom or dad or whomever is at work for all day long because they have to work multiple jobs. And you also don't know what you don't know. I grew up, I came from poverty. I've kind of pulled myself up a little bit, but honestly, like the idea of credit was never introduced to me really. I mean, we touched on it in economics, but it was never really addressed. And so I started my adult life with really poor credit and have had to struggle against that my entire life. And people in, like you're talking, the family systems that have wealth, they're setting credit accounts up for their children before they're even 18. They have investment properties that they are putting in their children's names before they're 18, and all of these things that someone who is just struggling to get by and put food on the table for their kids, they don't have the energy or the time to look into what it is that they don't know and how to be better in that environment, in that situation.
And look what we've put in all the kids' hands. So that's where they're getting their information, is social media. They're not watching television. They're not reading newspapers. And like you said, Ashley, if there's no parent around, I learned politics from my dad, watching him watch Reagan, and then listening to my parents debate amongst themselves, like what they agreed with and what they didn't. But when families don't have that, so I think the root of it is the family structure. If you really break it down and you look at it, and the how that has changed over the last 2-3 generations.
Well, why is that family structure broken down? Because we can't live in a one-income house anymore. There are really no jobs that are accessible to people who are not already wealthy and in those families and in those circles to be able to live off of one paycheck, let alone one. If you have a single adult who's working multiple jobs, it's still difficult to get by. So to just say, it's a values issue, it's a family structure issue. Well, no, it's an economical and humanitarian issue. We need to raise minimum wage. We need to do all of these things that allow people to better themselves and to grow. If you make college information inaccessible to people who don't have the ability to pay for it or have to go into debt to be able to get education to better themselves, then you're never going to solve the problem. You have to make changes in a systemic way to be able to make life better for people who don't inherently have that access.
I agree, but I think a 2-income household, whether it's a mom and a dad or 2 adults or whatever, to share resources, to share income, to share babysitting. I think that helps, just getting a roommate helps you afford rent. But a lot of people want to live by themselves for whatever reason. I'm just saying it's an opportunity. And I think with the divorce rate the way it is and social systems the way they are, it's just different than it was a few generations ago.
Yeah.
I think it's also different. And I think that, when when I was in high school, I think thinking about college, the conversations for people were not only you must go to college and get an advanced degree. The conversations were also there are opportunities for vocations that you can go into where you can also make a really nice, healthy income that can help you provide for whatever household formation you may want. And I think the other thing that we haven't really necessarily touched on is that there are more potentially multi-generational households happening, sometimes by design, but also by default. There are people who are not only taking care of younger family members, but also older family members, because, there's a need for, grandma, grandpa can no longer live on their own, but now all of us have to be all hands on deck. So whereas, 30 years ago, your parent may have said, okay, after school, you go to the library for 3 hours. Now it's, you have to come straight home after school and you have to stay and watch grandma or grandpa, in the evening. So there's all of these dynamics at play that I think it really is an economics issue. And we also have to talk beyond the going to 6 figures of debt for a college degree. That's
Here's
not always
something
the answer.
I just realized that a lot of things you touched on it seems like a failure of the family structure. That's what it seems like. Because when you have everyone collectively helping out, failure is almost impossible for me to say. That's crazy, but I think you see my point. When you have a group of people, when you have the tribe helping each other, you move as a tribe. You keep your tribe safe. You keep your tribe fed. You keep your tribe educated. And I think that's where the ultimate failure has come into play in this country. The tribalism's not there like it should be, which, as I said, it comes down to family structure, because you help each other that way. You help each other pull each other up. You help keep each other safe and healthy.
But it may be not just family structure, but just the way that we interact with each other as human beings has deteriorated substantially.
Oh yeah.
There's not as much of a sense of community. And that often is really the key, where I may not have, children, but I might be willing to be helpful to my friends and their kids and all of that. And we have pulled apart more than we're pulling together in many instances.
Well, and if you look at the stigma of many people, helping someone else is looked down upon. Like, we don't want to fund somebody else's healthcare. We don't want to help somebody else pay for something. If it's going to cost me money and it's not going to benefit me directly, I'm not interested in it. And I think that's part of it. But going to the family structure, when you have adults who are having to work longer and longer into their lifespan and aren't able to retire and take that role of, let me watch the kids while you go to work, and, being within that family structure, the family structure is not able to be there because Social Security is not stable. People are having to work longer to ensure that they can survive past 65. So it goes back to Nikki's explanation with the social and economical situations. We need to do better for our people.
And people move further away from their families these days, perhaps than 20 or 30 years ago. So a perfect example is I was talking to someone this morning who has basically uprooted their entire life to be closer to their 5 grandchildren. They literally, a house came on the market next door to the 2 youngest ones. Okay, so she bought that house. She's going to sell something over here and something over there so she can plop herself down and be there. That is such an incredible luxury, where many people at this person's age are still working just to survive. My own sister she bought a house in another state to be closest to her 2 younger children and the 2 youngest grandchildren. that was a luxury that she had that many people her age do not.
Yeah.
And with the psychological advances in understanding a lot of toxic family situations, a lot of younger people are pulling away from their family because it's just toxic for them. The way that older generations have interacted with their children and the expectations of them, it's become something that my generation and below are working really hard to break those generational traumas, because we recognize how impactful they are, and it causes depression, it causes anxiety, which leads to so many other issues that makes it difficult for one to follow the typical standard box of how you're supposed to live.
You know what? You're always touching on something that really sparks conversation in my mind. I want to address it so bad, but we'll be here forever on one topic. But that's one thing that's very interesting. Generations, they all interact differently than the other generations. They all handle stress differently than the other generations. So, I mean, the question is, should the previous generation teach the new generation, this is how we grew up, this is how we interacted, this is how we dealt with things. So let me tell you how you can deal with those things during your generation. Are you saying that that's not possible? That's not the way to approach things?
Absolutely not, in my opinion, because the thing is that when people say something like, I was spanked as a child and I turned out okay, so people should be fine with it. You really, if you're suggesting that somebody should deal with something that has been scientifically proven to be traumatic and cause psychological issues, you are in fact not okay. You did not turn out okay. Just because you went through something does not mean someone else should. The older generations should be more open to what people are learning, to what science is showing, because it may have worked for you when you didn't know better, but we know better now. And we have so many different ways of dealing with things that have been scientifically studied for years that show us the huge amount of trauma and psychological issues that are imparted by corporal punishment, by not having a caregiver there for the first 5 years of life, the attachment dissociations and disabilities that are coming from that. It's insane, but people don't want to hear it. They don't want to adapt and change because they feel like they've done it for so long. It causes cognitive dissonance for them to accept, okay, maybe what I did when I was learning how to parent wasn't the best way to do it, and there is a better way now, because that makes them feel like they did something wrong, and that's too much for their psyche and their pride to handle.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think sometimes it's very interesting to see in family structures where there may be age gaps between the oldest siblings and the youngest siblings, and sort of seeing the real time sort of shifting. And also watching, one of the most beautiful things I have seen come from people who have removed themselves from these toxic environments, when they find their elder generation mentors that did not go through that, and watching these beautiful family structures sort of build with, the unrelated aunt and grandparent that you find in your new location when you have done the work to sort of come out of that toxicity. And you find that there are people from those older generations that were not impacted and did not act in that same way. So I think that there's a lot of possibility from things like this and technology that open you to new possibilities and new connections. People just kind of need to actually leave their devices, as I'm sitting here in an office talking to you on this device, and connect. Like I love when I go into a coffee shop on a weekend, and just the ability to connect with new people in the neighborhood, or when you're out on a walk away from the devices. I honestly think people don't take enough time away from the devices to reconnect with the world around them.
Yeah, that's accurate. Very, very accurate.
I feel like there has always been a new technology that has taken up people's time. I feel like before cell phones, we always complained TV, the TV babysitter. Before that, I'm sure radio, this newfangled thing, everybody's sitting around the radio and not talking to each other. They're just listening to that. So I feel like it has less to do with the technology itself, but the expectations of how we utilize it. My kids are able to play more with their friends because they go online and they play video games cooperatively together. And they utilize that. They talk over video chat while they're playing the games. And it's very similar to what they might experience playing outside that I got to experience as a child, but I can't let my kids just run off to the park by themselves. So it gives them an opportunity to kind of emulate what I got to experience as a child, but in a digital format. And I think a lot of people forget about that aspect of it and just condemn it as all bad. But again, there's a lot of different sides to things. So.
All right. We're going to talk about this forever if we don't keep going forward. Because all this is fascinating to me. I could talk about this all day. And I have to force myself not to. I talk to everybody around me about it, and they're like, will you shut up? So anyway, I'll move to, this is a good one, taxes, tax reforms, and investment incentives. Everybody's flipping out about taxes. Let's see. Okay, so break through my notes here. President Trump has outlined several tax reforms and investment incentives for his 2025 administration. First one I got here, I won't read through all of them, I guess. Extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCIA, of 2017, the administration plans to make permanent the individual and corporate tax cuts introduced in the TCIA, TCJA, just love fonts, which are set to expire at the end of 2025. Next one, reducing corporate tax rates. Proposals include cutting the corporate income tax rate from 21% to 20%, with potential reductions to 15% for companies manufacturing domestically, which is what we touched on earlier, aiming to boost U.S. production. And the last one, adjusting the state and local tax deduction cap. The administration is considering increasing the SALT deduction cap from $10,000 to $20,000, though this proposal has caused division within the Republican Party. So before we start talking about taxes, let's jump into three quotes here. Stephen Moore, Trump's economic advisor, he says, doubling the SALT deduction cap from $10,000 to $20,000 is a compromise that would cost the Treasury significantly less than completely eliminating the cap. Next, this is a quote from Trump. We aim to cut corporate taxes to 15% for those producing goods in the U.S., which we talked about earlier. The Tax Foundation said extending the provisions expiring in 2025 would add $4.6 trillion in deficits over 10 years. I think one of you touched on that. Oh, Paul, I think you touched on how much debt we're in. And it just keeps growing. So do you think this could possibly add on to this issue?
You know, I think it could. I think the whole part of it, I mean, we've talked on so many issues today. And the economy is so interwoven with so many different things. So we talked about tariffs, we talked about deregulation. Now we're talking about taxes. I mean, I think everybody on the surface thinks they're in favor of tax cuts, and I'm not saying that I'm against them. But what's that going to do? Is that going to spur the economy? Are they going to is it going to get the traction and the reaction that they think? Is it going to bring, if we reduce the corporate tax rate down to 15% for domestic production, are we going to see more companies bring production back onshore and offshore? Is that enough to offset the cost of that? So I'm hoping it would have the intended effect, but I just don't know yet. So I think it's one of those, we'll have to wait and see. I think for a lot of Americans in the lower income brackets, anything that they can do to help them would be greatly needed. Back to Nikki's point earlier, it's heartbreaking when you see somebody having to make decisions on what does and doesn't go in their grocery bag at the grocery store. So if that will help spur things here locally and there's a trickle down effect, I think that would be ideal. But we all know, back to the point of corporate greed and everything else, that trickle down never seems to hit Main Street, but it always touches Wall Street.
Yeah, that's accurate. Anybody else got something on this one?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this one, and I'm thinking about the last time Trump was in office. And I consider myself to be part of the middle class, and on the personal income side, I didn't see any benefit to anything that was done from 2016 to 2020 with the new tax laws. But it's kind of a balancing act, because as an investor, I'm for anything that is less capital gains tax and lets me make more money. But when I live in a state that has personal income tax, unfortunately, so I have to factor that in too. Especially on the wholesaling side of my business, where it's pretty much all cash and it's 1099 income. So it's all a balancing act. And I have yet to see a policy really in the last 10 to 15 years that helps me find that balance between both my business and my personal life.
All right. Anybody else?
I think in theory, the idea of incentivizing domestic manufacturing is great. But those of us in the real estate, we all know what the cost is to actually create a plant in the US. Like if you're operating mostly overseas, to change that, to build a manufacturing facility in the United States, you have to purchase the land, you have to build it. And we already talked about the fact that there's a labor shortage and materials are getting more expensive. So if you're looking at the difference between I'm going to save a little bit of money in taxes, or I have to spend a lot of money to make that, to get that incentive, I'm not sure that it's enough for people to actually put the time and effort into moving their manufacturing companies stateside.
Yeah. This is my curiosity is through the roof with this whole tariff thing and trying to increase domestic production of goods. I'm fascinated because I said this years ago. It's like I want to start buying more high quality things, hopefully American made. But here's the question: is this country still producing high quality goods like that anymore? That's the question. I don't know if they are or not. They're starting to be more so, but when I had that thought years back, there wasn't much. It didn't seem like there was much.
And
I think we have the capacity. Go ahead, Nikki.
No, go ahead.
I think we have the capacity. The question is, will we do it? And I think a really great thing to speak about, we're talking about how this past election is going to shape us over the next 4 years. Well, if you're thinking about opening up manufacturing and you've got to go ground up, will you even be done in 4 years? So you've got to start thinking about, wonderful, you have all these incentives and all these plans, but we know in 4 years, you're no longer going to be in office. So we live in 4-year segments of time, where you look at some of our counterparts internationally, where they have a premier for life, they have a president for life, they have somebody in a lifelong post. So we are so different than all these countries that we're competing with and we're trying to work either for with or against. But that's the hard part for me, is I would love to see more domestic manufacturing and bringing some of the things in, especially things that are critical to our infrastructure, that are critical to cybersecurity, that are things that we've seen that could be leveraged against us. But the reality of it is it still comes down to capitalism. And can you bring this thing out of the ground and get it up and running and have some sort of surety that all these incentives that you're promising us are going to be in place after you leave office? And I don't think there's a way that they can do that.
I agree. I think that the timeline just may not necessarily work, but then also going back to the dramatic shift in the economy today versus when he was last in office. Sure, we could bring things back to be done here it will be more expensive. People are literally trying to decide what they're buying on a weekly basis for their groceries. There's just, it's almost like a pipe dream. Never mind that it won't be done in time in the next 4 years to build some stuff ground up and bring it back. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. I mean, all these plans that presidential administrations come in with, you can't get it done in 4 years. 4 years is like 4 days. It's very short, and it takes many years to even have these things come to fruition.
Yeah, and if you really think we have these presidential election cycles that are 4 years, but halfway through every presidential term, there's usually a shift from the legislative arm. So really, we kind of operate in like these bizarre 2-year spurts. And unless everything aligns, there's really a strong chance that things just change dramatically halfway through. So anyway.
So do you think that the possibility of pushing more tax avoidance systems and strategies will increase over the next 4 years? A lot of people in this industry, they think this is why I would vote for an administration like that, because that gives me more opportunities to avoid paying taxes for an amount of time, things like that. Do you think that's a possibility?
I think people are under a false assumption that that's how that works. I think people, going back to the education inadequacies, people don't have a really good understanding of the cause and effect of how our economy works and how different things affect us. So, for instance, Trump said that he's going to give fully expedited approvals and permits, including but in no way limited to all environmental approvals, but only to people who are investing $1 billion or more. So again, all of these things seem to be centralizing on the 1%, on the highly wealthy. Those of us who want to have the American dream, who are trying to rise and do better in our lives, we are not afforded those same opportunities. So if we really want to create a better system where we are seeing the benefits of those tax cuts and things like that, they need to be focused more toward the middle and lower classes so that we are actually seeing the actualized version of that, not just because, again, like I think it was Paul who was saying earlier, the trickle down effect, it doesn't work. Like we don't see trickles.
No. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And people hear the sound bite, but they don't look at the fine print.
Mm-hmm.
All of the details are in the fine print. And when you look at the fine print, it does not apply and will not impact the overwhelming majority of people.
All right. Anybody else? No tax information? Okay. Let's move on to housing affordability and supply. Now, I could say, maybe this doesn't really have any issues intertwining with people doing real estate investing versus agents who deal more so with housing supply and people selling and people not selling because their mortgage rate's good. But let's move forward on this. Let's see. So we got some quotes here. Well, let's start with the quotes from Trump on utilizing federal land for housing. That one was a shocker to me. I don't know. He says, we're going to open up our country to building homes inexpensively so young people and other people can buy homes. Next, on reducing regulations. These zones will be ultra low tax and ultra low regulation. Last one here on housing affordability. We will make housing affordable again by cutting regulations and opening up federal land for development. That federal land thing, that was a shocker to me. But let me move on to, I had some quotes from some experts here. Jacob Channel, is that Channel or Chanel? I don't know. Senior economist at Lending Tree. Fewer regulations and more available space on which to build may reduce home building costs and help increase the housing supply. Ann York, professor of economics at Meredith College. If the goal is to increase the quantity of housing, With lower housing prices, the only way for that to occur is the supply of housing were to increase. And lastly, we have Carl Harris, chairman of the National Association of Home Builders. Now is the time to take action to address the nation's housing shortage and let builders build. So once the federal land thing really sparked something in my brain, and then I thought, well, what's the reason we have all this federal land that is on lockdown and nobody can touch? Environmentally, possibly. I don't know. What do you think? Anybody have any opinions on this?
Oh, yes.
Me too. Go for it, Brad.
All right, well, I don't want to, usurp anyone's time. I have a lot of opinions about this federal land thing, which to me is just ridiculous. I think in my mind, the whole theory of using federal land for development is just an excuse for not creating jobs, not investing in small business, not doing the things that really drive the economy. It's a Band-Aid. It's unrealistic. It's never going to happen. And it's nuts. I mean, there's no other word for it. It's an excuse, and it's avoiding the real issues at hand in my mind. And that's kind of how I see it.
Okay. All right. James, you're up. What do you got?
I don't know. I dirt bike and use trails, right? And so I've been following the Blue Ribbon Coalition, which is a group that's trying to save these trails that are getting shut down left and right across the country. Moab, Utah, which is a huge destination for off-road recreation. They've shut down a bunch of trails and trying to figure out like why they're doing it. What's the fine print? Who's behind it? You see things like, there's environmental groups using owls as an excuse, but maybe it's some big corporations trying to do a land grab. What's going on in the background? But it's concerning when they're trying to shut down places where we're used to having a recreational outlet, and then all of a sudden they start drilling for oil or building homes. I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns there, but it's concerning.
Yeah. You touched on so maybe it's the whole push to get us in more housing, locked in our houses, locked to our screens, and crushing our society even further and moving us further away from nature.
But I think this has a huge conflict too. This is, again, capitalism versus idealism. So we all want more builders to build and build more stuff, but where's the land going to come from? Are we going to take more farmland, which those farmers are going to want to get fair market value for it? Every builder that I know of is a capitalist, and they want to maximize productivity and profitability. So in my marketplace, they are very strategic. They just don't build to build. They bring product online as needed to be absorbed in a timely manner and hopefully drive prices higher and higher. So I think, again, we've got this conflict. So how do we come up with something that's going to work? And I don't know what the answer is to that. But I think you're fighting capitalism on every one of these issues. You guys tell me a farmer who doesn't want fair market value for his land, a developer who doesn't want to make profit on what they develop and bring to market, and a builder who does the same thing. So how do we make housing more widely available and affordable when everybody that's behind housing is driving for profitability?
I think there's an opportunity to, I don't agree with the federal lands. I probably don't know enough about it, but I think we should protect our federal lands and not let foreign investors and foreign countries purchase our lands. Most other countries don't let foreigners own land in their countries. So I think we need to maintain control of that. But what I was really going to say is we've got an opportunity, at least in urban areas. We've got a lot of blighted areas that could really use some redevelopment. And I would rather see money put there than taking, like you said, farmland and other areas, other land that could be utilized in other ways that would, benefit the greater good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the
I think
opportunity
that's a great point.
zones. That's great. Oh, go ahead, Brett.
No, go ahead. I cut you off the last time. You go this time.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying I love the fact that they're putting some effort into those opportunity zones, supporting those for those blighted areas. So anyway, that's all I had to say.
So yeah, I mean, I do 80% of my business in Baltimore. I'm a Baltimore native, and there's opportunity zones everywhere in Baltimore. They just have never the city government has never figured out. But what I will say is about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, when I was working with the mortgage companies on this housing crisis, we worked a lot with the city of Detroit. And Detroit, if you know anything about it, it did something pretty amazing over the last decade in that it redefined itself. Back in like 2013, 2014, there was 80,000 vacant homes in Detroit. Now, to put that number in perspective, Baltimore's never had more than like 15 to 17,000. So that's a huge number. And the guy who runs Quicken Loans, his name's escaping me, but he opened up the headquarters in Detroit, and he got a bunch of people together, and some of us, sat in on some of these meetings, and they wrote a book about and put together a partnership where they created these public-private partnerships in Detroit, and they found uses. They categorized every vacant home. They literally went through the entire record of every vacant home and categorized them and decided what they were going to do with them, whether it was a public-private partnership, whether it was a city takeover, whether some of them even became urban gardens, which is kind of a cool concept. Some were just flat out demolished, and it really transformed Detroit. They have much less of a vacant housing problem right now and a blight problem. They've redefined their industry because obviously the manufacturing industry was dying and they had to redefine themselves. So they have more of a tech-based industry. And Quicken Loans subsidized 11,000 units in the downtown area so that they could incentivize people to work for them and live in the city. So it's amazing to me that 10 years later, almost no other city that's in that situation has taken that model and used it because they've proven that it works. And, I just, that we have a problem in our urban areas. I mean, I love Baltimore, but it has a very bad reputation and there's a lot of validity to it. But it's because no one has taken that model that Detroit used 10 years ago and applied it to their own city, even though there's a lot of similarities. And these are how you solve these challenges. But it seems like nobody wants to do it now. And we just want to try other solutions. We want to, let's go after more vacant land. Why don't we deal with the problem that's actually already in the areas where we can build?
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think also it kind of brings up the topic of redlining and why there are these areas that are so poorly maintained and falling apart, and the stigmas that come along with, well, I don't really want to live in that area because there's not access to the things that I want to live in, and that's kind of where we need to do a lot of work on. We need to work on creating access regardless of the areas and doing a lot of work with that, because the real estate industry has a really horrible reputation and history in how we've treated people and how we've allowed these little pockets of culture to stay and not being intermingled and learning and growing with each other. So I think being able to develop those urban cities, but still maintaining culture and still being able to allow those small businesses to thrive is really important as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess that's part of the reason why it kind of struck me, because Sandra's in St. Louis. I'm from St. Louis, so I'm familiar with that city and how things are and how many opportunities for investors are in that city. It's astonishing. You wouldn't believe it. But then I think, Brad, you touched on the city governments. There's the bottleneck right there. There's the bottleneck. So, greed, organizations, nobody cares about anybody else. I don't know what's going on. Vacant land doesn't seem like the solution to me at all. I don't know. They're here in Vegas. They're building like there's a mass exodus about to happen. there's so many houses being built. It is unbelievable. So I don't know. They know something we don't know, I guess. But
yeah. I worked for the company that developed Summerlin back in the day when they acquired all that land. And I know how Las Vegas is just, it's been boom and bust and boom and bust and boom and bust for the last 15, 20 years.
They're out of control. I'll tell you that. All right. So
I also have a picture of myself and the former mayor of St. Louis somewhere in my records because we did a lot of
really?
in St. Louis back in the day. Mayor Slay was a friend of ours.
Oh, wow. Okay. Gotcha.
But
Ashley's about to jump off. Ashley's about to jump off, so I didn't want to let her run out of here without saying goodbye to everyone who's watching and everyone who's going to watch afterwards. So Ashley, I'll go ahead and give you the opportunity to plug yourself. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for that. Like I said before, I am a realtor in Central California, and my company is Realty from DeHart. We focus on relationship building and really being there for my clients. So if you are interested in investing in the Central Valley, there's tons of opportunities. We have a great population, and there's lots of different ways to invest. And so I would be happy to help you out with any of it. So you can see me at my website. It's realtyfromdehart.com, and also on all major social media platforms except Twitter. I'm not there. Don't look for me there. Or X.
All right. Awesome. All right, Ashley, thank you very much for being here with us today. I'll follow up with you through email, and we'll make some deals happen maybe. Never know. Never know. Everybody's going to connect afterwards. So, thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Thank you.
Antonio, I thought you brought up a good point earlier. And Brad, thank you for Summerlin, because I lost big on my investments in Summerlin, so I appreciate that. But our business is based on boom or bust cycles. And so it's always knowing when the wave's going, when the water's coming in, and when it's going back out, and how do we navigate and pivot through those cycles, just like we have for the last couple of years. And I think that's also indicative of so much about what Nikki talked about. We live in 2-year cycles of how do we navigate this. So I think that's one of the things that makes it kind of like this so fascinating, is we're all coming up from different parts of the country and different markets. But the reality of it is we're always doing this, and how do we learn how to navigate those waters?
Yeah. Somebody has a crystal ball here. I don't know who, but there's so many homes being built. There's so many frames up. It is unbelievable. There's about 10 feet between each house. I wouldn't want to buy that house. There's no privacy. As soon as you have too much of a good time, somebody's going to complain. That's aside from everything we're talking about. But massive boom here. Let's see what we have next. Federal Reserve policies. Let's see what we can find with this. Nobody else has anything about the housing affordability? You don't want to live on any federal land out in the middle of the desert?
Apparently moved to Vegas. You've got all the homes.
Yeah. I think it's the public-private partnerships can be very impactful when done well. If you go back to New York in the 70s and the 80s, there were programs where people were able to buy brownstones, and people came together and they bought co-ops. So that's the public-private partnerships will be helpful for sure. But again, right now, the majority of people are so burdened with their housing costs. To transition from renting to ownership is a huge gap there for a lot of people, because they're spending so much on their income on rent, let alone feeding themselves, that they can't save enough to then buy properties. Never mind the housing, the inventory concerns. So, but I think public-private partnerships will really be the way. And I've been fascinated following what's going on in Detroit. It's been really interesting.
Detroit is a massive case study there.
we've gotten into co-living investing, so renting by the room, and luckily our governor passed a law just recently, about 3 months ago, saying that the municipalities, cities across the state of Colorado cannot restrict. You can have as many unrelated people living in one home, where before it was restricted, and so they've lifted that. It's opened it up because they're trying to figure out how to make it affordable. Now, this is not for people to own homes; it's for rentals. So it's helping with that gap between, living with your parents or whatever, or being homeless, and then that 1-bedroom apartment that's probably, in this market, it's about $1,500 or more. So somebody can go rent a room in a co-living home for $800-900. And I know that we're, normally you're looking at rent being 1/3 of income. They've actually changed the law where you can't restrict that. It can be half, which is putting people in a tighter spot, but it's at least, giving them a chance to actually have a place to live. So it's going in the right direction, I think, as far as regulations to help people get into a place because what's beautiful about that is, they can afford that and maybe be able to save up to where then they can go into the 1-bedroom apartment, or maybe they can do the leap. And we've seen this, they're doing the leap from living in a co-living home in one room and then being able to save up enough and go actually buy a house. So I like that trend.
We'll
be a part of that.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we used to do when we were young, right out of high school or college. You got a roommate. And a lot of people are opposed to that now. And I don't know that I understand why. And there's probably many reasons. But, that's what we've been telling our kids. Get a roommate. That's how we did it. We didn't come out of school and buy a $300,000 or $400,000 house. You rent for a while, save up some money, start in a starter home. But in a lot of the markets, there aren't starter homes, and they're not in affordable areas. So in my business in rehabbing, I like to try to rehab houses and revitalize houses in neighborhoods that are in more of a starter home price range. So people can get into housing. That's just my personal mission, is to try to make it, give someone a nice house, revitalize one in a neighborhood. But I don't know why so many young people are opposed to having a roommate. So I'm glad that that's becoming a trend in Colorado. A lot of young people move out there. You've got a good population shift happening there.
Yeah.
But that's what we've told our kids. Hey, we didn't all start this way.
But I think this also raises an interesting point about that it's getting yourself on the ladder and starting, and where you start is not where you end. I was out yesterday with someone, it's a roommate situation, but you could tell that their expectations were based on where they're living now, where they've been with their parents who have done really, really well. And it's like, well, you're moving to New York. You start with a roommate, maybe not the most amazing apartment, and then you get a better job, and then you move to a better apartment. And like that progression of starting with something that's not like Instagram perfect seems to be gone for a lot of people. It's got to be perfect and Instagrammable at the beginning. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. You kind of, move up the ladder, and that seems to be difficult. When you look not on the investing side, but from the traditional end users, everybody wants something that has completely been done soup to nuts, whereas the real value is buying the thing that you need to put in a little bit of love.
Spoiled. Everybody is spoiled.
I was thinking the same thing. We spoiled our kids. What have we done?
Yeah.
But I think you see that, to Nikki's point, you see that across the board and everything. I see people coming out of college that they've worked hard, they've got their degree, but they want to walk right into the six figures right away, and they want this, that, and the other. To both Sandra and Nikki's point, nobody wants to take the stair step. I want it right now, and if I don't get it, I'm just either going to quit, walk away, or sit on my hands. And I'm just not seeing that commitment to taking the steps. You know, I get people that will come in all the time, and I always call it, you've got champagne taste on a beer budget. You want a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,500 square foot home like your folks have. But then I said, let's get your folks on the phone. Let's see where they started. Oh, they started in a 3-1 without a garage and 1,200 square feet. They made it work. And that we just can't get that. I'm just struggling to get that through their head that you have to start somewhere. And you don't, where I'm at, you don't even say roommate. It's just off the table altogether. So it's just a different thought process now.
Yeah,
I would like to see more builders building homes like that, you know, kind of post World War II era, you know, smaller, more affordable homes. They're not in St. Louis. I mean, they're just not. You have to renovate them. It's investors doing it. We're doing it.
Nobody here wants to build that.
Which I have no problem with as an investor. I'm fine with taking those homes.
Exactly. Right. I'll do it.
You're right.
It's also the economics of it. You know, if it doesn't work to build the smaller home and the costs are and numbers are better when you're building something that appeals, it's like we're stuck in a chicken and an egg scenario at this point. Because I've watched, when I started in real estate 20 some odd years ago, there was a boom of new buildings built in like the early 2000s. And the unit mix was really fascinating because you had studios, you had 1-bedrooms, you had large 1-bedrooms that could become 2s, and so on and so forth. And about 10 or so years ago, a bunch of new buildings being built, and the 1-bedrooms in this building would have been 3 bedrooms in the buildings 10 years before. So it completely shifted who was buying them. And running around now with buyers, and they go, I don't want that. I want to buy the thing that's completely brand new, gut renovated, new construction, but the new construction product isn't actually affordable for them. What they need to be buying is the thing that maybe someone lived in for 20 or 30 years. Maybe they didn't do the work. Maybe they did some renovations, but it's livable and it's somewhere to start. And then you move on from there. So it's a really fascinating, I blame HGTV.
So there's a bit of a catch-22 and all that. And you brought up a good point in that because interest rates are where they are now, most people looking to move into a new home aren't willing to move into anything that's not absolutely perfect with interest rates at 6-7%. Whereas 3 years ago, when interest rates were 2 and 3%, they're willing to take that 2-3% and put 20 or 30 grand into the house. And that's a huge challenge right now for new homeowners, I think.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. It's hard enough for new homeowners to be potentially prepared for the non-cosmetic cost of ownership that will come up, let alone the idea of putting in a little love to a property.
Yeah. It's the it seems like it's the microwave generation, Paul. That's what I was thinking when you were talking. I mean, when you have grown up and all you've known is a microwave, you get everything like that. It kind of trickles into your everyday thought process about life, love, living, so on and so on. That's just my personal opinion. But so since we got the clock ticking on us, I'm going to skip ahead and we're going to jump to the last topic here. The other topics we kind of touched on. This topic is urban development and gentrification, this is always interesting to me. So let's see. The Trump administration's urban development policies, particularly regarding gentrification, have elicited various perspectives. Let's start with quotes from Trump. Secretary Mnuchin estimates that private businesses will invest $100 billion in opportunity zones, and that's going to be in a fairly short period of time. Next quote, I am happy to inform all of the people living in their suburban lifestyle dream that you will no longer be bothered or financially hurt by having low-income housing built in your neighborhood. Gotta love his anyway. The last quote, we will get it done. That's for urban revitalization, which Sandra, we were talking about that. So the three quotes I have here from the experts. Paul Solman, PBS NewsHour correspondent, says the Opportunity Zone program has not necessarily spurred economic growth and jobs in distressed communities the way it had been envisioned. Charles Blaine, urban policy analyst, says there's a chance for Trump to help bolster local economies as long as he avoids government-funded economic development models and embrace a private sector alternative. And the last quote we have from Samuel Stein, urban studies scholar, gentrification isn't inevitable. It's the result of decades of policies that reflect the power of wealth in shaping our urban landscapes. A lot of people put a bad name on gentrification. I mean, maybe I don't know enough because I don't know anything as far as I'm concerned. But gentrification tends to build up neighborhoods. But apparently at the same time, it locks out a lot of people to where affordability really comes into play. So what do you think about that?
I just had that experience a couple of weeks ago talking to another agent and some people in a particular community in St. Louis. It's one of the older neighborhoods, beautiful old brick homes, 100, 150 years old. And it's quite a popular area, especially with younger people, because there's great little cafes and things nearby. But a lot of those homes were built as 4 families or 2 families, duplexes, and they've been converted to single families. And now a lot of the young people can't afford the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 building that used to house 2 or 4 family units. So that's a shame. And I think part of that's greed and part of it was opportunity. People were seeing that was a trend in a few neighborhoods in St. Louis for a few years. And now because of affordability, we're wanting smaller homes. So now we've, converted these. So do we convert some back? What do we do? It's kind of a conundrum.
Yeah, big time. Big time. It'd be nice if there were a multitude of duplexes. This sounds like an opportunity for renters and an opportunity for investors. But nobody's building new duplexes. I don't really understand why. What do I know? Anybody else? Gentrification's the dirty word.
I don't know. I mean, I'm a Baltimore guy, and I've seen it work in a lot of neighborhoods in Baltimore where I would never have even thought to go anywhere near when I was growing up. But again, as almost everything I've said today, it's all a balancing act. So what happens is in these neighborhoods, there's one called Remington in particular that I'm thinking of. It's a neighborhood that's been totally revitalized, but it becomes the affordability problem that we've been touching on now. Who can afford to live in that neighborhood because it's totally transformed? You've seen it in Washington, D.C. big time over the last 20 years. Especially, it's practically unaffordable to live in any neighborhood in D.C. where you used to be able to get in, pretty cheap. I believe the last time there was a home for sale under 6 figures was almost 20 years ago in D.C. There has not been one since. So again, balancing act. How do you do it? How do you incentivize people to buy in these neighborhoods and make it affordable at the same time? It's just it's tough.
Well, I think one of the other challenges there is that you're incentivizing people to come and buy in the neighborhoods where often the people who are longstanding residents of the neighborhoods do not have the capacity to purchase because the incomes are so dramatically different. So I think this is a place where maybe public-private partnerships come in, where you are bringing in people who have the capacity to buy, but you're also creating opportunities for the existing residents to purchase. Maybe I'm thinking back about 25 years ago, there were some areas in Harlem and East Harlem where they did things like this, where there were 2 and 3 family residences that were built that were specifically open to neighborhood residents who met certain income requirements and they were able to purchase. And then there were also condos that were built up. So I think there has to be a very delicate mix of both.
And Nikki, again, you just bring up all the good points today, but I think anytime you go through something like this, what does that do to the residents that are there? Because it generally causes displacement, and then that becomes a big social issue. You know, we see that in our limited, I'm in a much smaller market than most of you, but we see that when we go into these areas that they definitely need the reinvestment. But when we do that, all of a sudden the value of everything goes up. So for those people who are renting, the owner of that property, their property taxes go up significantly, and it creates an economic impact on people who can probably afford it the least. So while I am a proponent of helping people out and getting these areas into a much better shape than they're currently in, how do we factor for the economic impact that it's going to have on the long-term residents who are there primarily because of financial reasons, and it kind of dictates where they have to live?
Yeah, and then you look at going back, I think I'm harping on the grocery stores. Clearly it's the holidays and I'm going to grocery stores a lot, but you then see in these neighborhoods, you see the shift even in the grocery stores, and you see that people can no longer afford to buy their groceries in the neighborhood because the grocery stores have all the prices have gone up. They've been gussied up. They've been renovated to appeal to the new residents, but the people who've lived in the neighborhood for 30 or 40 years now can't afford to shop. And I think that, New York is a very interesting environment where the overwhelming majority of people are not six-figure earners by a long shot. So you really see it in the grocery stores where you have people who've lived in the neighborhood for 20, 30, 40 years, along with people who just moved in 5 years ago. And the people who moved in 5 years ago and they bought the $600,000, $700,000, $1 million apartment, they're buying, well, maybe not everything. And then you have the person who's lived in the neighborhood for 30 years and they're deciding what they can afford. And the prices have gone up and up and up. And you watch people, I'll be on a bus coming down from the airport and people are traveling 40, 50, 60 blocks away from their neighborhoods to buy groceries that they can afford. So it's a really delicate balance that has to be struck, frankly. But anyway.
But it's almost like robbing Peter to pay Paul, because now I have to commit extra resources to travel and take the time and the cost and the expense of travel,
right?
Just to buy basic living necessities and things to take care of my family.
Right. Time that you may not have because you're working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. Anyway.
So what do you? Here's the thing I've thought for years. When you have older neighborhoods, what do? Just let them continue to run down? I mean, what's the solution?
I think it goes back to the public-private partnerships and those organizations working together. And I'm watching a little bit of this happen right now in East Harlem, actually. I'm seeing newer businesses, new product being built, and the attempt to straddle keeping on and creating infrastructure and things that are affordable for the people that are local, but also appealing to the people that are coming in. And it's a very slow, laborious process. And there has to be input from all of the stakeholders. And there's always someone who's, terribly, terribly unhappy. But it's hard. It's hard. I don't really have a great answer for it. Yeah. I hope to see more of an answer in my lifetime than not. But that's because I plan to live forever.
Oh, good luck. Let me know how you do it, because I'd love to try it too. other than being a vampire. I mean, that's the only way I can see it. But
people in my family live well into their 90s, so
awesome.
I have quite a number of decades to go.
So before we start heading out of here, the question is the American dream dead? Is it dead? Because it was always tied to home ownership. Always. Is it dead? Is it dying? Is it reviving? What do you think? Let me get from each one of you. What do you think?
Well, I have young folks living in my home, my children and their friends that we talk to. Excuse me. And they are, many of them are convinced they'll never be able to afford a home. So we have lively conversations around that. Do talk about roommates and, like Nikki was saying, working your way up the ladder. So it's tough. I think for that generation, that is their perception. But for the rest of us, especially entrepreneurs, we know there's opportunity out there. So bridging that generation gap is going to be tough with the housing market and interest rates the way they are now, and jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an evolution. And to your point about roommates, one of my best friends, her son bought his first house using funds from his sneaker arbitrage business and pedicabs. And what he did is that he figured out that he could bring his roommates from where he had been renting and have them move in with him and pay him rent. And that enabled him to buy his first house. Then he got married. He eventually sold that and he bought something else. But he was thinking about it from the perspective of, how can I start with what's available to me now and then scale? And I think there's an evolution that we think about home ownership as the home that you live in. But what if you are able to buy your first investment in a market that you do not primarily live in, and use that as a way of starting to build and scale wealth? I think there's an evolution that will happen for today's people. At least that's what I'm telling a lot of my clients as well here in New York, where it's often very difficult to buy your first property. But if you are earning enough that maybe you can invest in St. Louis, or you can buy something in Vegas, or you can buy something in upstate New York and start to build your portfolio and your wealth, and think about it in perhaps a less linear, but a non-traditional way.
Paul, what do you got?
Well, I think that adjusting expectations, I see this a lot. So, and I think it sounds like everybody's somewhat in agreement. We have all these people that they want to start exactly where they're at now. And to me, a lot of times when I'm faced with this, I'm like, you guys are still living at home. Matter of fact, we're guilty of that. Our kids are living in 2 of our rental properties because it is so unaffordable right now. I don't think it's dead, Antonio, but I think it's definitely broken, and we have to figure out a way to fix it. What that pathway is, I don't exactly know. We talked about here briefly about the treasury and interest rates. Well, we know, and I told people this for 30 years, price appreciation doesn't scare me as much as interest rates do. And so all of a sudden, we've seen massive price appreciation in my market over 20 plus years. And we saw interest rates that were artificially low. All of a sudden, interest rates adjust, and people aren't willing to take that risk. They're not willing to step into it. So I would love to see interest rates come down, but then we also have to balance that with inflationary pressures and all the other things. So I think there's so many pieces to this puzzle. I love what Nikki's talking about cooperation between the private sector and the government sector. But in honesty, we haven't seen that in 30 years. So I don't know, how do we get back to that? So I think there's so many things here, but I think it's really adjusting expectations is the big thing, because the generation that wants to buy needs to buy, and we need to have expectations that aren't attainable for them right now. So to Sandra's point, how do we reintroduce the idea of going in on things together? In my market, like right now, real estate investment for investors is not very feasible. So we're doing a lot more syndication. So we're syndicating subdivisions, multifamily, things like that. The collaborative effort of bringing people together. So I think we need to see more of that. But to answer your question, I don't think the American dream is dead, but it's broken and it may be on life support. So how do we revive it and get it healthy and make it sustainable so everybody who wants to and works hard and deserves that right gets that chance?
Yeah, life support. I that's about right. Yeah. James, what do you got?
Let's see. Yeah, it's like my computer's so slow. I don't really have much to add. I mean, you guys had great points. The expectations is one of the big things, and then just how do you actually make it happen? So I think teaming up. I just had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day. He's got a son who's like 20. He's trying to figure it out, and he's actually like works at a car wash. He saved up a big chunk of money, not enough to buy a house here in Denver, but he can get a loan, team up with a couple of his other buddies that want to do the same thing, and at least get on the ladder, like I said earlier. So just can't give up. Just got to keep going.
Yeah, where there's a will, there's a way. That saying is still viable forever in every humanity on this planet. So yeah, it's possible. Brad, what do you got?
Well, just following James, I just want to say that I will never forgive myself for not buying a house in Denver when I lived there in the mid-90s. I completely missed that boat. Huge mistake. There's not a whole lot to add. I wouldn't say that the American dream of homeownership is dead. I would say, using our terms, that it is undergoing a massive rehab. I have a college age kid who, I definitely worry about 3-4 years from now when she's finished, gets a job and all that. Where's she going to live? What's she going to be able to afford? And it all comes down to education from us, real life education, not school education, and teaching them about finances and not making the mistakes that we made to mitigate some of the risks that's involved with the way the market is right now. And I think that's the key to all of it.
Okay. All right. We'll see what happens. We'll see how bad Trump screws stuff up. Every president gets in there and they drop the ball here or there. I mean, it just happens. Everybody's full of it. They say things, they do things. They say they're going to do things and they do nothing, yada, yada, yada. We're all used to this at this point, but all we can do is speculate. And that's why we're here. So this was great. Thank you all for being here. Brian Briscoe was supposed to be on. He did not make it. He was wrestling with his schedule a little bit. So we're going to do some outros here. And Sandra, we're going to do you last because I got a special announcement for you. But let's start from top and mosey on down to the bottom. Brad, we'll start with you.
Well, I just wanted to say that I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this. A lot of good stuff, good ideas. Hopefully get another opportunity to do this again in some other capacity. And, I'm easy to find. I have a very unique name. If you plug me into any search engine, you'll find me on social media, just about anywhere else. If you type in We Buy Maryland Homes or We Buy Houses Maryland from anywhere in the country, I guarantee you I will come up number one organically. So you can reach me that way too. And again, great stuff. I'm humbled because I'm amazed at the amount of information and the intelligence of everybody on this panel. Just great, and I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Paul.
Antonio, thank you so much for this opportunity, and to every one of you, it was great to collaborate with you. I think I wish we had more of these and we would see more of this in all aspects. More debate, more civic conversations about trying to brainstorm what's going on and then what do we do to solve that. So I really appreciate it, and anything I can do to help support you, please let me know.
All right. Nikki, what do you got?
No, super grateful for the conversation and the collaboration. I hope that this is the beginning of many conversations amongst all of us. And I'm very easy to find. And I hope that we can continue the conversation in the years to come and come up with some solutions.
All right. James.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you guys all being on here. Hopefully have you come back on for our monthly show, or maybe the roundtable at the end of the year next year. So thanks again. Like you said, Paul, like it's I think it was Paul said, or anyway, the mind share here is great. That's what I love about this. You know, we have people watching, but just between those of us that are on here, I'm picking up stuff. I'm like, gosh, it's a lot of stuff I'd already thought about, but there's a lot of things I hadn't. So it's great to just like get in there and share what we've got to share. So anyway, rambling. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, Sandra, what do you got?
Well, I always love a good panel discussion, and I agree with you, Paul. I love healthy discussion, even when people disagree. I think that's a lost art, just to be able to share our thoughts and learn from each other. A good mastermind is always great for things like that. So I'm easy to find. My website is under construction. You can look at it, but it's changing. It's firstfreedomproperties.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. And my email is sandra@sandralivingwell.com. Trying to merge a couple of my businesses and passions around living well and real estate and keeping people healthy and moving forward. Love helping communities. So thank you, Antonio, for having me on. I've really enjoyed hearing all of your perspectives, and I do hope we get to all stay in touch and do this again sometime. I love it.
All right. All right. And so before I end the show, I got a little video for you.
Even though investing in yourself has proven to be the best strategy for building wealth for you and your family, it's not always so easy to find your tribe along your personal journey. In the world of business, it can sometimes feel daunting to seemingly always be in the good old boys club, where you may or may not be taken seriously. Well, now, real estate investing isn't just for the guys anymore. With real conversations about strategy, business relationships, actionable steps, financial goals, and more, you've just found your tribe. Welcome to United States Women in Real Estate Investing.
All right, that was a video I think some people have seen before, but that's my little announcement that Sandra will be the new host for United States Women in Real Estate Investing. I'm proud to have her on here. We just recently reconnected and everything, and I'll tell everybody a secret. Sandra was the first person that didn't think I was insane for creating this platform here. As my little way to get into the industry, learn about the industry, and help other people learn about the industry. So, Sandra, I appreciate everything you've ever helped me do, and we're going to do some great stuff moving forward too. And you have a new book. Do you have a copy of your new book there? Go ahead and plug it. There you go. That's coming out. When's that coming out?
It's out now. It came out this week. It's on Amazon and Kindle. It's called Rental Wealth. This is a project I started 7 years ago, even before I knew you, Antonio. I started investing as a landlord and learned a lot along the way, and really kind of mastered my skills and started wholesaling and rehabbing and got my license. And people kept asking me for help. You know, can you teach me what you did? I want to do what you did. How do you do that? Because I'd left a 25-year corporate job and jumped into real estate investing. So I used to teach a small course in the St. Louis area. It really wasn't my passion. So I wanted to put things in a book form so I could help people and give them something that they could really sink their teeth into. So this started as an ebook. Always wanted to publish it. Finally got that done. It's not long. It's not a novel. It's, I think, 65 pages long. So I say, renting rental investing is an open book test. It's not complicated. There's a few basics. Once you learn, you can really launch your business and make it your own. So thank you for letting me talk about that. I'm excited that I finally got it done. So I hope it helps a lot of people. Rental Wealth on Amazon and Kindle. Thanks, Antonio.
Awesome. And your release date, is it already out now or is it coming out?
It came out this week. Thank you. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep, it's on there now.
Good timing.
Yes, it was great timing.
Yeah.
Well, that was part of what you and I have been talking about, getting all these pieces together that we've been working on for so long. So
this is going to be good. So the show, United States Real Estate Investing, we have, or Women in Real Estate Investing, we have a bunch of episodes with the previous host, Janae Ortiz. She was great as well. And so we have some of those that are banked and they will be put out forward. And then Sandra will come out with the new ones behind that. And eventually Nikki will have to get you on one of those. But that is an exciting show. I really like it. And it's a lot of women sharing a lot of things and a lot of information that tend to get overlooked. And that's what I thought was really important to address and to share with the world in this industry. So it's an exciting thing to actually start focusing on. So I'm excited about it. So we'll start doing that at the beginning of the year. So be on the lookout. I guess we've touched almost everything. We had to skip a couple. But just want to say that make sure I get my outro information correct. Thank you all for being here with me on the United States Real Estate Investor platform, which is a crazy adventure. I'm having a blast, get to meet a lot of good people like you. Me and James get to tear things up once a month, crack some jokes. So that's always fun. We'll have to get all of you on that show eventually as well. Good luck to all of you in this new presidential season that we're about to jump into or fall into. And I just want to say thanks. And let's see, I don't want to forget any piece of information. Follow me for more content on UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com. At the top of the site, go to newsletter, click subscribe. You'll get all the information I send out to everybody. And a lot of good stuff, a lot of giveaways, other things like that, merchandise. It's getting better. It's getting better. It's getting bigger. It's getting more exciting. So I just want to say thanks again for everybody watching. The live stream will be available afterwards. So just give a little time and next thing you know, it'll be there. You can rewatch it over and over and over again until you're just beat to death with this content. Anyway, so I just want to say before we go, like I always say at the end of all my shows that I host, let's see. Stay grateful, stay successful, and be free. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Have a good day.